see the red light?
I'll be your little light. Oh, man. All right. Yes.
Ready?
Ready? I'm sorry, then.
No, you're not. Yeah, I'm not.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us for the first public hearing of the 2026 legislative session. And I will tell you, we have a small but mighty list of speakers. We are diverging significantly from what was posted online. My apologies for not following the ordering of speakers to the typical tradition of the committee. And so I'm going to start for the day by offering the opportunity for anyone to weigh in and speak. I'm Jamie Foster, the House Chair of Veterans and Military Affairs. I will offer the opportunity to speak to my co-chair.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Happy to be here and happy to hear lots of public input about these important veterans bills that we're looking at today. Thank you.
Next, I'm going to go to my right and see if our Ranking Member Anderson has anything to say.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon. We thank everyone for joining us today for the first public hearing of the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. We have 13 bills. They're wide-ranging. Tax and fee relief for veterans and veterans organizations, facility namings, military protection orders, veteran services and healthcare, and finally, 2 bills concerning veterans' final resting place. I'm looking forward to hearing your testimony and reading the written testimony as we move these policies forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I should have had you go first. You did a nice job synopsisizing what we're doing. Next, Senator Gordon, do you have any comments before we begin?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to say thank you for everybody who submitted testimony and those who will be testifying, and I look forward to listening and learning during the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you. And so for our first order of business for testimony, we invite the military department, and I believe the designee of General Yvonne is Michael Sipples.
Good afternoon, chairpersons, Senator Honig, Representative Foster, ranking members, Senator Gordon, and Representative Anderson, and the members of the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. I am Brigadier General Mike Sipples, the Assistant Adjutant General of the Connecticut Military Department. General Yvonne is unavailable to testify today as he is in Washington, D.C. attending an Adjutants General Association of the United States meeting, of which he is the current president. It was my honor to be appointed to this position in July of 2025 after serving in the Connecticut Army National Guard for 30 years and 38 total years of military service. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony today in support of House Bill 5294, an act concerning the Adjutant General's recommendation regarding the military department. This legislation is part of the military department's ongoing effort to modernize Title 27 of the Connecticut's General Statutes. HB 5294 updates statutory language concerning the unorganized militia and the governor's military staff. These two entities have not been operational for decades, but their potential value to the state precludes their elimination entirely. The unorganized militia generally consists of all male citizens of the state between the ages of 18 and 45. The purpose of the unorganized militia is to serve as the pool of potential recruits for the Connecticut State Guard under extraordinary circumstances. The existing statutory language currently only mandates that males of the designated age group be part of the unorganized militia, but makes membership for females voluntary. This differentiation based on sex does not comport with recent federal military policy, nor is it the general policy of this state. While this statute will hopefully never be utilized, the unorganized militia should not reflect any bias on the basis of sex. The governor's military staff is another remnant of a time predating the modern National Guard. While currently a statutory requirement, this amendment will make the governor's appointment of the staff permissible. It also removes the large required appointments from all branches of the armed forces, the United States, and the state militia. With this bill, the only required appointments will be the governor's state military cabinet members, which include the Adjutant General and the Assistant Adjutant General. However, it also permits the governor to make additional appointments from both the armed forces, the United States and the state militia that the governor deems necessary under these circumstances. Ultimately, this bill will eliminate the military department's administrative burden of appointing and administering a state staff entity that is not utilized in normal course of state business, but retains the option to do so when needed. Finally, this bill would rename Camp Net at Niantic to Camp Net. This change would simply bring that facility's name in line with typical Army facility naming conventions. Thank you for your time and support of Connecticut's home team. I or my staff are happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Brigadier General. We appreciate your testimony today. Do any other members of the committee have any questions? We're just checking online for Zoom. Yep, Representative Anderson.
General, thank you for your testimony. Just a comment, not a question, because I think you already answered it. The proposal to, in a sense, have females available for a draft, I'll call it, for an unorganized militia, which I do agree with you. It potentially could be very important. My question will be, I'm curious if you know the last time unorganized militia was used.
I do believe the last time the organized, and correct me if I'm wrong, is World War II or beforehand. So it's been almost 100 years that we've actually used anything along the organized militia. But we can get you a specific date when it
Yeah.
was used at last particular juncture.
That's enough. I'm going to say you gave the reason for including females, but I found, the federal statute still doesn't. And I'm going to tell you that I'm uncomfortable with it. I think men and women are equal but different. So we may, on my side, we may have problems with that provision. Just stating that now ahead of time, but thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
I am curious if you have anything you'd like us to have in the record as we navigate moving this forward. It's obviously part of your leadership plan. I also think that there's standardization amongst the rest of our statute where we're looking for gender neutral language as like a standard throughout our statute. And so I'm curious if you have a response of, you want to sort of justify that we when we go forward and we're screening these after the public hearing and making a decision about how we move forward as a committee, if you have any response to the inclusion of women equally.
The main thing to look at is this is not a draft. It is for the state militia, which would handle things here in state if there was a very large war along the lines of World War II where most of the currently serving would leave. So it would be here to support what's going on here in state on the unorganized militia side, not necessarily registering for a draft or a selective service per se, as was mentioned that the federal government still requires males to do.
Representative Vale.
Thank you. So I need some clarity now. So Representative Anderson referred to as a draft. You said it's not a draft. So the last time it happened was, we said maybe World War II. What's different from this than a draft? Would someone have to enlist? Like, you said it's not a draft. If you could just clarify for me what this would do if we needed to call upon people to serve.
During World War II, the militia in the states would make sure lights were out when it came to coastal units or coastal states in the local neighborhoods. Again, it's not necessarily for a draft because that's a federal responsibility. It's to support the state.
So all the people in this pool would be subject to, what would you call it if it wasn't a draft? It was in reference to serving the state. They would be asked to do so without volunteering. Is that correct?
That would be correct. However, again, we have not used it in many, many years, and we are looking just to standardize the language to comport with where gender neutral languages, specifically in state statute and federal statute.
But if Representative Anderson represented that in federal language, that they are not making the same change, or they don't have it. So how would that fall in line with the federal language? If they're not using that same language, why are we?
As far as the draft goes, because the federal government has not touched the draft for many years now, I think the last time we used it was in the early 70s. But we have opened up on the federal side many areas of the military that were male only. And now there is a gender neutral responsibility across the federal government and federal units.
And this falls in line with what the federal government is doing.
As far as opening up and giving the opportunity to women that would like to serve in any capacity, in any position, to include the state militia or the United States Army or any branch of the military.
Well, I support that, and I support my daughters wanting to serve, my son wanting to serve. But this is different, if I'm correct, because this is about us kind of forcing people into action if we got into that. So whether we call it a draft or not, it would be a draft at the federal level. It's some type of mechanism that would require our citizens in this age group that currently are just men, would be adding women, or not adding women, but changing the language so it's gender neutral. But currently, now women wouldn't be required to be forced into the service. Is that correct?
On the federal side, yes, sir.
And if we were to change this language, they would be here in Connecticut
For the militia portion.
for the militia portion.
Yes.
But there's nothing currently that stops them from volunteering for that same militia portion, correct?
Absolutely, sir.
So basically, all this would do would be to force women into a potential state draft, whatever we want to call it. Clarity. I hear what you're saying. I'll listen more to the conversation, and again, we'll be talking about this more before, we vote on it and all that. But I appreciate all your answers. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
I look forward to us following up more later. Any other questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you so much, sir, for your time. Our next speaker today is Commissioner Ron Welch. Thank you for joining us today, Commissioner.
So good afternoon, co-chairs, Senator Honig and Representative Foster, ranking members Gordon and Anderson, and representatives from the Military and Veterans Committee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak today. My name is Ron Welch, the Commissioner of Connecticut Veterans Affairs. The department appreciates the continued support of the administration and the legislature to ensure we provide a final resting place for our veterans. Cemetery expansion and new cemetery establishment has been and will continue to be one of our highest priorities. At this time, I don't believe establishing a statutory deadline to, quote, designate one or more parcels of land already under the custody and control of the state or newly acquired one or more parcels of land in the state for the establishment and maintenance of the Veterans Cemetery in addition to the Veterans Cemetery established and maintained under subsection A of this section, end quote. The department is well suited to continue to provide the final resting place for our veterans. The other technical changes to the statute will only be required when we have more than one active cemetery. So what I'd really like to focus on now is to give you an update on where we are. The Connecticut Department of Veterans Affairs operates the Connecticut State Veterans Cemetery at 617 Bow Lane in Middletown. The cemetery was dedicated on the 1st of November 1985, and the first burial was conducted on the 2nd of December 1985. There are currently 14,602 burial plots and 3,000 in the columbarium niches at the cemetery. The Connecticut State Veterans Cemetery participates in the Federal Department of Veterans Affairs Cemetery Grant Program. This program provides regulatory oversight of the cemetery to ensure a continued high standard of operation and appearance. Additionally, the grant program provides grants for improvements and expansions of existing cemeteries and the establishment of new cemeteries. Our cemetery was initially established under this grant program and has received one improvement grant and one expansion grant. We are currently in receipt of a grant of $2 million for our small but vital expansion of our cemetery for burial cremain plots. The good news is we're about 30% done with that project right now. All VA grant funds 100% of construction costs. They don't fund any property acquisition. As a grant eligible cemetery, we are required to maintain 3 burial options: full casket burials, in-ground cremain burials, and columbarium interments. In our full written testimony, you'll see the table below with the status of our total burial sites, available burial sites, average annual usage, and projected depletion dates for each burial option. And this data is current as of 1 February 2026. The key things on that table are our full casket burials right now will be depleted in July 2035, which means we'll no longer be able to do any full burials. The in-ground cremations, that's the one that we're really struggling with, and that's why we're doing this expansion right now. We would be depleted in September of 2027. And in the niches, we have until 2035. We submitted a pre-application for an expansion project for our cemetery to the VA grant program in June of 2025. We were offered the grant, we accepted it, and we rapidly moved on. We initiated the expansion projects with Department of Administrative Services, Office of Construction Services to expand our burial cremain plots using existing land at the cemetery. So if you look at the cemetery in Middletown, if you're familiar with it, to the very right front portion of the cemetery, there is some space available there. There's a cottage that we're in the process of removing to expand this site. And the whole purpose of this project is to increase our inventory of buried cremain plots by approximately 1,400, moving the projected depletion date forward by 5.5 years. So that'll allow everything to happen at the cemetery as we are doing now through 2033. The ongoing expansion of our current cemetery prolongs the projected lifespan for new burials in the short term. But what it doesn't do is address the long-term solution that we really have to resolve. Our department, in coordination with Department of Administrative Services, are actively seeking property in Connecticut to establish a new cemetery. Administrative Services issued a request for proposal quite a while ago for 50+ acres of buildable land. To date, we've reviewed 15 proposals. When I say reviewed, we physically have looked at the paper side of it, but we've actually got on the ground and walked those 15 different sites.
Do you mind wrapping up your testimony shortly, sir?
I'm sorry.
Do you mind wrapping up your testimony shortly, sir?
Oh, sure. So bottom line, we are moving forward and we're prepared to working very closely with administrative services to procure a large parcel. And hopefully we can resolve this issue for the next 100 years and the next commissioner and other representatives won't have to keep kicking this down the road. We do have the bonding available and we're working closely to purchase that some property. We have 2 quotes in on a big parcel that we're looking at currently. And I'm prepared to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Welch. I think I'll start by with the first question. So we did have multiple legislators who have reached out to our committee, either through bill introductions or for asking for us to create some sort of public accountability. I think what you've shared here is helpful data for us to know and understand the deadline that we're up against. How soon or how far away do you think you are from notifying the public that you have selected a final location and you have a plan for moving forward? When do you think you'll know that we have this sort of settled?
We would hope in the next couple months. Again, we received 2 quotes that we were waiting for. So now it's on administrative services, proper and procurement team to see if they can negotiate with the realtor and get a purchase agreement moving forward.
I appreciate that. I have questions about other bills that you have not
Yeah.
yet spoken and testified on, but you've submitted testimony for. But before I get to those, I'm going to offer other folks the opportunity to talk. Representative Vale.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, Commissioner.
How are you?
All right, very well, thank you. How are you?
Good.
So this bill, so again, listen to your testimony. You recognize that we've had this issue. I've been on this committee for quite some time and we've definitely had these conversations. But you don't support this bill. Is that correct?
Well, we don't think we need a date attached to it. One of the dates was by 2027. I believe it said we had to procure property. And we don't feel like we need a hard timeline right now because we are expanding at our current location, which will push us out to March of 2033. So the initial crisis has been resolved. Now we're really looking for a new cemetery for a long-term, 50 to 100-year fix.
And there are specific parcels mentioned in here?
There are no
Plot
parcels,
Number 6.
not that I'm aware of.
All right.
There was an old parcel that related to our former master plan, which was not buildable at all in the Middletown area, down by the railroad, in that area, if I recall.
Okay. All right. If I have any more questions, I'll just reach out to you.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no questions from other members of the committee, if you don't mind, I'd like to ask you about your testimony on House Bill 5297. So 5297 was a suggestion from a veterans organization. I'm curious about how often members of the VA staff refer folks who are coming in and who need help to nonprofits in the space who are reputable and that you've vetted. If there's like a list of places that the VSOs commonly refer veterans to, trustworthy partners. Because right now the website shows no.
Right. So in the testimony that I prepared, I just want to refer you to one of the paragraphs on my page 2. It's probably your page 1, but it talks about in the last 4 years, no organizations have submitted a request or an inquiry on how to be added to our website. We meet, I have, since I've been commissioner, established a quarterly veteran service organization meeting. I was calling a commissioner's quarterly meeting to bring all those veteran service organizations in, VFW, American Legion, Disabled American Vets, Veterans Rally Point, Columbus House, House of Heroes, those organizations all together to make sure that we're all on the same sheet music. We knew what activities were going on. We would consider those credible organizations. We have talked to our BITS partner on other agencies that may want to put something up on our website. And in terms of credibility, we're just a little bit concerned that with the digital landscape that was initially talked about in this original bill going back to 2011 and 12 timeframe, it's changed a lot. We have seen websites mirrored and a bunch of things like that happening. So we're just a little bit concerned about credibility relative to unknown organizations and links appearing on our website. They gain immediate attention, like we've endorsed you, right? So that's a concern we have. There's various search engines with algorithms, and we believe that there's potential unintentionally directing a visitor to our page that's untrustworthy. So we're concerned about that. How do we monitor that to make sure it's really a legitimate organization? We have an application process that we can vet, but we are.
But no one's on it. So no one's met the current.
Nobody's
rigor.
approached us yet about, I want to get on your site. that I'm
Yeah.
aware of, that our team's aware of.
The reason why I think this was flagged to us by an advocacy organization are they're reputable organizations that the VA, Connecticut Departments of Veterans Affairs, regularly partners with. Like,
Yes.
for example, Veterans Legal Aid
Yep.
or the Disabled Veterans. So we want, like, for those who are routine partners,
Sure.
that there are a lot of folks nowadays who get ideas of what their resources are, not by calling you and saying, hey, I need assistance with a claim. It's escalated beyond what my authorized VSO can support me through. And so if they spoke to one of your staff, you would refer them to an attorney organization that you vetted, that you know is reputable and reliable and working on behalf of the veterans. And so I guess what it begs to question is, like, even if it's difficult and you have to go through this process to vet them, shouldn't the ones you're already regularly working with be on there? Because
Sure.
it makes it look like, we've always, across every space in state government, we have this issue. In, like, the anti-hunger space, there's silos, and if people took advantage of every resource available to them, their lives might be easier and better. And so if we sort of give people that one-stop shop, no wrong door opportunity to say, hey, Connecticut DVA, I'm a veteran and I'm struggling. And then you could have a list of agencies and organizations that were ready to step in and support that person, then they might get help easier and not end up sort of hoodwinked by one of these bad actors in the space. So I think our goal was less so to make you solicit and vet every veterans organization, but really to provide a roundup of, like, a small number of really well-performing, good organizations that a veteran in need or any veteran should just know about in general to help themselves or someone else. So if there's a way to adjust the language to meet that need, that is not a significant increase in burden on your staff, but gets some level of indexing of even if it's a small number to start, but that there are reputable organizations in this space. I think you've come from one. And so maybe a way to sort of escalate a small number of folks, just so we are encouraging people to go to those places that are the good actors in this space.
Sure, we have no problem doing that. We did modernize our website. Most of you know that in the last year, and we spent months working with our BITS partner. It's really cleaned up, and it basically focuses on our four functional areas, our healthcare center, residential program, Office of Advocacy and Assistance, and Cemetery and Memorial Services. And when we were going through that whole cleanup, we only had one organization on there. And unfortunately, we had issues with it. But we have no problem with what you're suggesting right now.
Okay.
We can make that happen.
Thank
See the
you.
issue.
Senator Honig.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You mentioned that the current setup gives you some sort of comfort with how charities might get onto the web page. Like, what's the current process?
It's an application process that, working with our BITS partner, they've established.
With which partner?
BITS, it's our IT partner that does all the IT infrastructure for the state of Connecticut.
But are they, like, somehow vetting the organizations that are getting on the website? Like,
Most of my counterparts have these embedded technicians that provide the IT support for their organization. They know what all the compliance rules are and regulations related to IT.
okay.
We have a customer service manager assigned to us. She's wonderful. Bethleen's her name.
Okay, but I kind of thought that the issue was you were concerned that some of the organizations that may make it onto your website
Yeah.
would, not be reputable and cause harm. And, you wouldn't want to give the endorsement of the DVA to these organizations. So there must be some sort of vetting that's going on now for someone to get onto the website.
There is. We're just hoping in a malicious way they don't manage to get on our website.
Oh, yeah. I wasn't thinking that people would just appear on your website. I thought the
Yeah.
issue was you were concerned about the process of people applying to get on your website. It seems to me that you should have some discretion, like over an application, as to whether or not they passed, whatever tests that you have, as far as, being a quality organization. Would, would that kind of thing be helpful and make you more comfortable with?
Oh, yeah. I mean, we'll have to do that on the vetting side. We'll really have to.
Okay.
Work through
Thank
that.
you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
All right, and I'm sorry to keep you in the seat for a little longer, but my last is you submitted testimony in opposition of 5298. So this bill was an attempt for me to sort of round up several of our colleagues' bills and concerns that we have had in the last year. And so I just want to sort of speak into the record today and sort of get your response. We have every year many legislators who say, we have a veterans related monument in our community. It would cost $2,000 to get new names added that we realized were missing. We realized someone's rank was wrong and we need several $100s to make a repair to that. Or we honor World War I and II and Vietnam era vets, but we do not have a GWAT era monument. And we're looking to add that to our veterans monument collection in our municipality. And so there's not really a good, from what I can see, pool of money available for municipalities or nonprofit organizations who are working in the space to do this, besides passing around the collection basket to veterans and people passionate about this issue. And so typically, a savvy legislator may be able to get some money sent back to their community. And we do not have really a vetting process to make sure, that that person was actually a veteran or, there's no system in place. So I thought we might be able to cross off T's and dot I's by having the DVA, confirm veteran status, and sort of allocate and appropriate from a standing pool of money resources for folks who needed it. And that grant that pool of money might also be available for nonprofit organizations, again, well vetted, who are looking to meet needs that we know are currently not well met in our system. So for example, during our speed dating, a couple of veterans advocacy organizations shared that it is routinely a challenge to get veterans ramps funded, and that's not well funded currently through the Soldiers, Sailors, and Marine Fund consistently. And so we're looking to find ways to create within the CTDVA a pool of money to sort of cross off these two, what we view as unserved and persistently requested issues that we're hearing as a committee. And so I hear your concern about not having staff. And so that's certainly something that we could advocate for. But do you feel like your organization is like positioned correctly to be the entity that oversees a grant such as this, a grant program such as this?
Yeah. So in the initial version, I think that we heard focused on the monumentation and the cemeteries. When we started to look at it closer, then we saw the bit about us evaluating applicants' residential repairs or replacement of mechanical systems at the homes of elderly, disabled, or means-limited veterans. And so now we're really looking at two things, right? We're looking at the cemetery and memorials, monumentation for cemeteries, and we're also looking at upgrades to veterans' homes that may require a ramp, a new boiler, something in their house mechanically that's down. We know there's a need out there. Our issue is that the governor's budget right now doesn't support that. What I would say to you is, and this is just my opinion, I think in the future, consideration should be given to getting some grant money. There are organizations out there, and there's one in particular that does tremendous work. It's very mature right now. It's a 503C, and that's down in Hamden, House of Heroes. So I think if they had access to some grant money, they could they could continue to do wonderful work along with Reason to Ride out in the eastern part of the state. And I know there's some other organizations that do repairs and do that kind of work. So
My understanding is that there's a couple of examples where state agencies have created grant programs where there's an application process for the grant and vetting of the organization. I'm aware that I, as the chair of this committee, and I can't speak for all of the other members of the committee, but we know that you are closer to this content, to the organizations in the space than we are. You're doing it every day as sort of your focus, as definitely your focus, whereas we are all pulled into a lot of different directions. And so I'm just curious if you felt like you could determine who is worthy of veteran-specific support grants. You have, an organization that meets that need in mind. Those organizations come to our committee and ask for appropriations. And then it just feels like maybe your organization could be the clearinghouse of those grants, perhaps, instead of it being us as a committee. That's what I was hoping you might be interested in doing. Not each home would get an app, that you would be handling those applications, but that you could give a tranche to support those efforts with those organizations, sort of like a subcontract.
okay, so the money essentially the grant money would come to us. And an organization hypothetically like House of Heroes has a technical expertise to, they're going to go out to assess the veteran's home, figure out what the needs are, fill out the application for the grant to us. We look at the grant and we think it's legitimate and we send the money in their direction. Same on the memorial side. Is that what you had in mind?
I envisioned or had considered originally that perhaps for the memorials, the towns would apply to you for vetting and you would administer that program. But for perhaps like every year, DVA would have, $200,000 in grants for veterans organizations that were meeting needs that you were hearing through your Office of Advocacy and Assistance. So perhaps you're probably the best source of data. You serve a huge number of veterans. And so through your Office of Advocacy and Assistance staff, people are asking us a lot for X, Y, and Z, and we're sending a lot of our veterans to an organization like this. And so we want to bolster and support those resources. That's what I was sort of thinking. DSS does this. The Department of Agriculture does this. A lot of the other agencies sort of give grants to aligned organizations that support the work that they're doing to bolster the state's infrastructure in the sort of public-private nonprofit space. So I was thinking that could be a way of sort of getting at a veteran having no wrong door. We know that your VSOs are hopefully referring people to social services at these nonprofit organizations when they need those things. So I was just thinking that this was a way to make sure that those organizations could be well vetted and perhaps better funded.
Right. The governor's budget doesn't support it right now. So that was why, we said we couldn't support it. It wasn't in the governor's budget. I don't know if this has been identified during the budget formulation process or not. But I think the way you described it, if money became available, we could do something like that. I'd have to talk to our fiscal manager. She may need another person, depending on the scope and magnitude of how much money we're talking about and how many different organizations may come to us. If we were doing a small pilot as a start, it might not be a huge burden on our fiscal department side, but I'd want to get her feedback to see what her thoughts are.
All right. I appreciate your testimony. Any other questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you so much, Commissioner Welch, for being with us today. We appreciate you. Our next speaker is from the DOD, Melissa Willett. You may begin.
Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to support the policies reflected in SB 278. My name is Melissa Willett, and I'm the New England Regional Liaison for the Defense State Liaison Office, and I represent the Defense Department and establish relationships with state leaders across New England on issues that are negatively impacting our service members and their families. Interpersonal violence can be defined as any behavior that asserts power or control over another person. These instances of harmful behavior often involve personnel who interact with both civilian and military jurisdictions, and without coordinated communications, violations may go unreported and unaddressed, risking further harm to victims. Through the implementation of interpersonal violence policies at the local level, states can empower victims, deter offenders, and create an environment for military families that enhance both resilience and readiness, easing the burden of having to navigate separate legal systems. By allowing the admittance of military protective orders as evidence in cases of domestic violence, we seek to ensure consistent safety across jurisdictions, which is critical for a population that relocates often. An MPO is an order issued by a commanding officer to protect a victim of alleged abuse, harassment, or threats, and that order restricts the actions and movements of the service member who is alleged to have committed harmful behaviors. These orders are typically issued in situations involving domestic violence, sexual assault, harassment, or other threats to safety, and they are meant to prevent further harm and ensure the safety of victims. MPOs are not recognized or enforced off installation, therefore military commanders in the state have limited authority over service member actions that occur off in installation. Explicitly allowing these orders to be introduced as evidence when a victim is seeking to obtain a civilian protection order will provide victims of violence or harmful behavior greater access to protections, services, and victim advocacy efforts that may not have been available through a standard MPO. Additionally, victims may not have to relive their trauma twice, once when obtaining a military protective order and again when seeking to obtain a civilian protective order or restraining order. I thank the committee for their consideration of this policy, and I am happy to answer any questions you may have at this time.
Thank you very much. Because I'm looking in the testimony list, and I think you're going to likely be, this bill is something that the committee has heard before. And do you believe, based on your previous engagement with the committee and challenges this bill has addressed previously, do you believe that we've addressed the concerns that you heard and were flagged to you in previous years?
I do. So the original bill was filed in 2023, and that bill was written in such a way that the military protective order would automatically be recognized as a foreign protection from abuse order. And that was unconstitutional due to the fact that there's no due process with military protective orders. So we reworked the ask with our stakeholders within the Defense Department, military community advocacy, and came up with a recommendation for states to allow for admittance of MPOs as evidence when a victim is seeking a military protective order. So that judicial notice can be taken of that MPO in order to show a pattern of harmful behavior to protect victims of abuse.
And I want to flag that the judicial branch did flag that the way that this information may be entered or processed could be a significant burden on them as an agency. And so I'm just curious if you know about how other states have handled the judicial branch's recognition of that information. It is my understanding, this is a little bit out of my scope of expertise, but from things that we have heard from advocates in the space, that the NCIC database is already currently considered. And this would just require that data to be entered into that database, which is common practice currently, I believe.
The military protective orders are entered into the NCIC database by the commanding officer that handed the MPO to the service member.
So that's already a federal requirement.
Correct.
Okay. And so does that change? Do you believe that you require the judicial branch to do anything other than check the NCIC database, which we believe they are doing anyways?
The intent of the bill is to allow the military protective order to be admitted as evidence in order for that pattern of harmful behavior to be proven by the victim. in states like Maine, we worked this policy priority in the Maine State Legislature in 2025, as well as the state of New Hampshire. And both those pieces of legislation allowed the courts to take judicial notice of the MPO when the judge was making his or her decision on whether to provide a temporary restraining order or a temporary protection from abuse order to the victim.
Are you aware of other states where making these changes required them to hire additional staff in their judicial branches to?
There was no fiscal note attached to either of those bills, and a current policy pending in the General Court of Massachusetts does not have a fiscal note either.
Okay, I really appreciate you answering my questions. I think those are all of my questions. Representative Anderson has some.
Melissa, thank you for your testimony. I do remember the bill 2 years ago, concerns. Do you know if our state courts are currently precluded from considering MPOs in hearings for restraining orders and civil protective orders?
I don't think courts generally are precluded. The intent of this is to ensure that it's explicitly clear that those MPOs will be admissible as evidence instead of should be admissible as evidence. Because oftentimes courts they do not have a military nexus of sorts and are not familiar with the military process and what the military protective orders are. And the fact that there is no enforcement of those MPOs off in installation, and some members of the judiciary assume that they are enforceable off in installation, and so there's no need for that enforcement. So this closes that gap for victims so that they don't fall through the gap.
Typically, would the victim go to civilian authorities soon after the MPO, or?
That depends on the victim. That's something that victim advocates on the military side often suggest to victims, but there are instances where they do not want to go through the civilian process, whether or not they live on an installation, so the MPO does protect them. So they wouldn't necessarily have to do that, but for those victims that live off an installation, this is what would definitely close that gap.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, we thank you so much for your time and look forward to moving this forward. The next speaker today is Michael Frieda. Mr. Frieda, you may now speak.
Good afternoon, everyone. How are you?
We're great, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. My name is Mike Frieda, North Haven's first selectman. I'm in my 9th term right now, and I'm also past president of the Council of Small Towns, COST, and also past president of Connecticut Conference of Municipalities. I'd like to thank the members of this committee who've collaborated with us on this working task force that we've had. My co-chair, John Carmen, I think is here today also. And we'd like to just give you a quick overview and then come up with what our recommendations are to help solve this problem. We heard from our commissioner earlier about the two state cemeteries, both in Rocky Hill and Middletown. And I must say the state does an outstanding job in maintaining those cemeteries and the veterans' graves. Many of us as municipalities, we also have our own cemeteries. In North Haven, as an example, we have 3 cemeteries, and we take care of those cemeteries with outside contractors who do all the grounds work, and we supplement that with our Public Works Department also, and that's gone very well for us in North Haven. The vast majority of veterans' graves, however, veterans that were really buried since World War I, they're buried in private cemeteries, and they're managed and maintained by municipalities, by a municipality in some respects, but also private nonprofit cemeteries and societies or associations. And some of those may be religious cemeteries, Jewish cemeteries, different faiths, different denominations. And what we've seen with this task force is the fact that in some cases, in fact, many cases, the veterans' graves, for some reason, aren't being attended to. And many of those that we see that aren't attended to are in nonprofits, so those cemeteries that are nonprofits. So our goal has been, and this has been a very arduous process for us. We're grateful for all the support we've had, the collaboration from Senator Honig, from also Representative Foster, from Representative Nolan, my colleague Paul Ciccarella from North Haven. So we're very thankful for what you've done, and Sam Sims here, our administrator, has done a great job for us. So what we found during our work is that there is a Connecticut State Statute 27-123 that really is a statute that should be adhered to, but there's been a lack of current compliance and enforcement about that statute itself. So what we're seeing is the need to try to increase and help those veterans whose families go visit these cemeteries and they look at these graves that are not in good condition. So can you imagine, as an example, a baby boomer, husband, wife, visiting their father or their father-in-law's cemetery at the cemetery and seeing the grave that's not attended to? Some may make an argument that those who visit the cemetery should probably clean off the stone, kind of edge it out. But the majority of people who may not be able to do that have issued complaints to many of us as municipalities. And we as a municipality and others, my colleagues across the state, we try to really help those people who call us. So what we're going to propose is that we take some of the authority out of the probate court, because a lot of the probate courts have been involved with this also in the discussions between veterans' families who were buried in these cemeteries. Perhaps
If you don't mind wrapping up your testimony shortly.
Yes. Here's what we're proposing. We're proposing that the municipality applies for grant funding for those municipalities that need help in terms of helping the veterans clean up those graves and helping those people. We're also looking to appoint 3 veterans from each municipality that would be sort of a liaison between veterans' families, the 3 veterans, to help field the complaints, and then work with OPM and have OPM or the Department of Consumer Protection manage those cemeteries that are non-municipality cemeteries in an effort to try to make progress to restore those graves to the condition they should be in. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your committee's work. I know it was a lot of work to get progress on this issue in the last couple of years, and this certainly has been one of the sticky wickets. I think that folks are coming to the Veterans Committee and saying, you know, they're unsatisfied with the upkeep of their loved one's grave, and they hope for better maintenance. And hopefully, we start making some strides of positive movement in that direction. Do any of my colleagues have any questions for Mr. Frieda? I see Senator Ciccarella.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'd like to start by thanking First Selectman Frieda for testifying today. More importantly, all of his work on this issue. It's a very complicated issue. One would think it's very simple. Let's find a way to make sure the people who served our country are respected the way they should, and it should be rather easy to do that. But because of all the different types of cemeteries that are out there, how they're owned, how they're serviced, and the different funding mechanisms, it's been a challenge. And I know working closely with Mike and having conversations regarding his meetings and his responsibility as a chair of this committee to try to figure it out. I know he put a lot of time and effort into this. And I just wanted to thank him and his team and the board that met and discussed these issues. I know that 3 minutes goes rather quick, Mike. So if you did just wanted to wrap up, because you were cut short unless you were able to get all of your thoughts out. I know, years or a year of multiple meetings to summarize in 3 minutes is challenging. So if you wanted to just kind of finish the thought, if you will, if you needed a minute or two, if that would be okay with the chair.
All right, if I can go 30 more seconds. So what we're proposing, and I mentioned at the end, proposing that the municipalities with 3 veterans handle the complaints at those cemeteries that are part of municipalities, and the Department of Consumer Protection manage the non-municipalities and handle the complaints there. And we as municipalities would apply for grants to help improve the conditions. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much again for your work on this and all the work that you do here in North Haven and across the state for the veterans. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. Seeing no other questions. Thank you so much for your time and thank you for your leadership on the working group. I know there are a lot of veterans families who appreciate your efforts. The next person on our agenda today is Ronald Shea. I'm going to say Shea.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ronald Shea, and I am a member of the Veterans Graves Upkeep Working Group, of which Mike Frieda is co-chair. I was named to that body by Senators Kevin Kelly in July of 2023, pursuant to Special Act 23-25, to represent the interests of members of the Connecticut Cemetery Association, an association in the state that represents cemeterians and other related professionals who serve the cemetery industry. As Mike said, over the past 2.5 years, our group has spent many hours delving into various issues facing cemeteries, whether they be military, municipally owned, privately owned, owned by a church, or what have you. Our working group was established specifically to address concerns relating to the proper upkeep of veterans' graves. The legislation before you, the result of our group's deliberations, calls for municipalities to establish a 3-person committee of veterans, whose duty it shall be to see that the veterans' graves are suitably cared for and maintained, quote unquote, without clearly defining what is meant by that phrase. It also establishes a mechanism whereby municipalities and the DCP may receive complaints regarding the care and maintenance of veterans' graves and attempt to resolve them. The cost of caring for and maintaining such graves shall be borne by the municipalities, if not paid by the trustees of the cemetery. I respectfully suggest that the language in Section 1B is unclear regarding the responsibilities that may place on individual cemeteries. Additionally, the proposed legislation updates an existing program to be administered by DCP that provides grants to municipalities for the care and maintenance of veterans' graves, quote, within available appropriations, unquote. This limitation raises questions as to its potential effectiveness. Finally, our working group also noted a lack of compliance with or enforcement of existing legislation relative to an annual reporting mechanism involving the probate courts. Thus, as Mike Frieda mentioned, it requires the directors or trustees of cemetery associations to hold annual meetings, to receive financial statements of the association, and to file a copy of those reports with the Committee of Veterans established at the beginning of that legislation. While well-meaning, it is unclear how this new requirement, Section 3B and Section 3D, will be applied to ancient or dormant cemeteries. For these reasons, I would respectfully suggest that the ambiguities I have pointed out be addressed before the legislation advances further. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. I am not sure if you've yet submitted your testimony in writing, but we would sincerely appreciate it as we review what is likely to be substitute language that we consider voting out of committee. And so we would love to just have in writing a record of your suggestions. And you sort of drew attention to ambiguities, but if you have suggestions for how we clarify them, including that in your written testimony, would be very much appreciated. Senator Honig, do you have questions?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Mr. Shea, for your testimony and for participating on the Veterans Graves Working Group. I'm just curious, when people do come in contact with veterans' graves that are not well maintained, is that typically just like individual graves that have the problem, or is it like the whole cemetery is not well maintained?
From my experience, it relates to a specific grave, and not necessarily, and very less frequently, that an entire cemetery is not well maintained, unless, unfortunately, they are ancient cemeteries or completely dormant cemeteries, and there's no obvious mechanism of who to approach. But most commonly, it's going to the management of a particular cemetery and saying, my father's grave, my loved one's grave, the marker is not, visible or what have you. So it's usually case by case, unless, as I say, in the case of sadly dormant cemeteries.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for joining us. Are there other questions from members of the committee? Seeing none, thank you very much for your time. Our next speaker is Brett Muschino. We'll come back and offer you a chance to come again. Our next speaker is Katie Zarziska.
Hi, can you guys hear me?
Yes, we can. Thanks for joining us.
Oh, thank you. Committee co-chairs, Senator Honig and Representative Foster, and distinguished members of the Veterans and Military Affairs Committee. Thank you for the opportunity to provide testimony in support of House Bill 5296. As you know, my name is Katie Zarziska, and I am the current president of the National Guard Association of Connecticut. NAGACT is a nonprofit organization with the stated mission of representing the interests of the current and former members of the Connecticut's National Guard. We have over 3,000 active members on our rolls. We are here today to talk about the National Guard active duty orders and pay, specifically state active duty orders. These state active duty orders are usually used to activate members of the National Guard to support state emergencies like hurricanes, snowstorms, civil unrest, or any event in support of the state of Connecticut and its citizens. Depending on the event we are supporting, our guardsmen may need to report to their armories with only hours' notice. They are leaving their families, homes, school, or jobs to help our citizens while having to put their own lives on hold. I want to give you an understanding of the financial realities and impacts that state active duty orders place on our service members. A private with a pay grade of E2 is paid $80 a day while on state active duty, and that state active duty encompasses a 24-hour period. These state active duty orders do not count toward any other benefits guardsmen are eligible for if they were on federal active duty. If they are injured on state active duty, it does not qualify them for VA healthcare, and if the injury is severe enough, it may lead to issues with continued service within the National Guard. To put it in perspective, if a guardsman was working in a minimum wage job for an 8-hour shift, they would earn $135. Our service members continuously show up because they possess the call to serve, but on many occasions, this causes a detriment to their personal lives. To put it into another perspective, the active Title X component, a private E2, also makes just under $80 a day. That comes to just under $32,000 a year. However, in the active component, that private will be provided with housing, food, medical care, and other benefits at no cost. They are also receiving many intangible benefits of being on active duty. Connecticut has, to its credit, provided National Guardsmen with a tuition waiver and other critical support. Hopefully, the governor's bill, House Bill 5048, will pass this year and finally make good on the promise of truly free tuition at our state colleges and universities. But even if it does pass, that private will still fill sandbags, shovel snow, perform security, and conduct other critical emergency response tasks for $80 a day. They will leave their families during an emergency, leave their full-time jobs, and protect their communities for that $80 a day. This bill will not increase the pay of our youngest and hardest working service members. That is an issue for another session. What it will do is provide them with a small amount of relief during the most difficult days of their career. Ironically, many of them would do the work for free or for the flag, as it is sometimes called, but that is not something we as a state should accept. These dedicated young men and women, sometimes teenagers, have shown their commitment to their community through their service. This bill will remind these service members that their community has their back in return. I want to mention something that you may or may not have realized. Ironically, state active duty has a highly appropriate acronym, SAD, SAD. This committee can make a real difference for our soldiers and airmen, some of whom, I remind you, will make less than $80 a day. It can provide them with a tax deduction when they are called into active service and hopefully make their time in service to their community a little less sad. Thank you for your continued work on this committee, and I will be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you for coming before us today. Senator Honig, you have a question?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And Katie, thank you for being here and for all you do on behalf of the National Guard here in Connecticut. Just wanted to understand the distinction between state active duty pay and perhaps the pay that people receive when they are just on regular training missions.
Mm-hmm. So state active duty is specifically that. It's when they're essentially getting paid by the state. Our drill checks come from the federal government. So it's Title 32, so it doesn't come with the same benefits as Title 10 does, but they do they do earn retirement points and are able to use that towards the end of their career. But state active duty, when they get called by the governor, that doesn't go to anything. They don't get retirement points for that. They don't get any kind of benefits. So we're trying to level the playing field a little bit. Not sure if that answers your question.
The pay that you receive for just regular training missions is considered active duty opposed to state active duty, because the way the legislation right now is worded is it makes exempt from taxes the gross income from active duty.
So active duty, active duty is when we actually get federalized. So whether you go on deployment or even for those of us that are active Guard Reserve, that's considered active duty. Or when you go away to training, but like our drill checks are not considered active duty.
Sorry, say that again. What's not considered active duty?
Your drill checks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Representative Anderson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Actually, I was going to have a similar questions as Chair Honig, and I think I agree with what you stated the intent of the bill is, but when I look at lines 365 to 368, it just says active duty, not state active duty. I infer from that it would include federal active duty, whether training or deployment. So do you think we need to reword the last section of the bill?
Then yes, if we need to clarify the language, we can do that to specify state active duty.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Anderson. Any other questions for members of the committee? Seeing none, I'm going to circle back around to Brett Machino. Not seeing Brett with us in person. The next speaker is Bill Polifka. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me here. Chairperson Hun and Foster, distinguished members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to speak today in support of HB 5296. My name is Bill Polifka. I served in the Connecticut National Guard, and I'm here because I know what it feels like to live with the possibility that your life can change with one phone call. In 1997, I joined the Connecticut National Guard right out of high school. I was a combat engineer with the 248th Engineer here in Norwich, Connecticut. During my time of service, I have deployed to help build border security in Arizona. After 9/11, we were put on standby to help support 9/11 efforts in New York City. We were never fully activated, but we stood ready. And even without orders in hand, life changes. You begin to prepare anyway. You organize your finances. You talk with your family. You share that you might not be available. You make contingent plans for your business. You prepare as if you're leaving tomorrow, even when you don't know if the call will ever come. That's the quiet reality of Guard service. Constant readiness. In 2003, the call did come. I was activated and deployed in Iraq. I was an E4. I had just graduated from UConn. I landed my dream job as a financial advisor. I was building my business, starting from scratch, building client by one. I finally had momentum, and overnight it stopped. I walked away from my income, from my growing client base, from the future I was trying to build, not because it was convenient, not because it was financially smart, but because I took an oath. I served on federal orders, but what I learned applies just as much here at home. When you serve, your life does not just pause, your livelihood does too. Since returning, I've stayed deeply involved in our military community. Through the National Guard Association of Connecticut, I've worked alongside leaders advocating for our soldiers, airmen, and their families. Through UConn's Entrepreneurship Boot Camp for veterans, and through Vets Rock, I've mentored Guardsmen and their spouses as they build businesses and transition their careers. I participate in many veteran community events, both here in the state and across the country. And I've heard their stories. Young Guardsmen losing clients, missing career advancements and promotions, small businesses struggling during unexpected activations, spouses holding families together with paychecks shrinking, paychecks being disrupted, all so a person can serve. These are not dramatic stories, they are quiet ones. And they happen when Connecticut needs our guards the most. Our Guard members never hesitate when we need them. They were there during the Waterbury water crisis, distributing critical supplies to families and hospitals. They were there during COVID, running supply warehouses, moving PPE, and supporting overwhelmed healthcare system. They were there in hurricanes, helping communities recover with hundreds of thousands of residents lost power. When our neighbors are hurting, when our communities are in crisis, our Guard shows up.
Sir, if you don't mind wrapping your testimony up shortly.
And too often, we do not, while earning less than minimum wage, without federal benefits, and with real financial strain, HB 5296 does not give them special treatment. It does not raise their pay. It simply says, if we ask you to stand ready for us, if we ask you to leave your families for us, if we ask you to protect our state, we will not penalize you. Your financial for answering that call. This bill is about fairness. It's about dignity. It's about sending a message to every Guard member in Connecticut that service matters, not just in words, but in policy. Our Guard members never hesitate when we need them. The legislation is how we make them know that we have their back. I respectfully urge you to support HB 5296. At the end of the day, the bill makes it easier for good people to keep serving Connecticut. That's what we want. Thank you for your time and your leadership today.
Thank you, Bill, for joining us today. I'd like to ask for clarification on lines 365 to 368. Mark raised that it says, to the extent properly includable in gross income for federal income tax purposes, the amount of any pay received by a member of the National Guard as a result of such member being ordered to active duty, and we didn't specify state active duty in this draft, do you agree that we should add the word state there?
I think that would be important.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. Seeing no other, I see Rep. DiCaprio online.
Thank you for today.
Oh, hold on one moment. One question.
sorry.
Rep. DiCaprio has a question from you online.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. And I'd just like to thank you for coming in and sharing your story. It's very enlightful, and I think we really need to look at this issue as a committee. Thank you again. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Rep. DiCaprio. Seeing no other questions, thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you very much.
To the members of the committee, thank you all very much for being here today. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have one more speaker testifying today, John Carmen.
Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to speak today. I thought I had signed up, but at my tender age of 78, sometimes technological things are more difficult. My name is John Carmen, and I was a co-chair of the Veterans Graves Upkeep Working Group with Mike Frieda. And this is concerning the raised bill number 282, an act concerning the recommendations of the Veterans Graves Upkeep Working Group. Just a little of background, I was honored to serve on this group as a practicing funeral director for over 58 years, a former board member for over 30 years of the Elm Grove Cemetery, which is a ecclesiastical society, second school society cemetery in Windsor, and I have been chairman for over 50 years of the Windsor Veterans Memorial Cemetery, which is owned and operated by the town of Windsor. I also served as president of the Connecticut Funeral Directors Association, president of the National Funeral Directors Association, and chairman of the National Funeral Service Foundation. Our legislative committee support group for the working group was able to research statutes that were already enacted that answered many of the concerns we were asked to address. And those were highlighted, and you've seen them in the legislation, but many were not being followed or weren't even widely known. Example, 3 veterans may be appointed by a town or city manager to advise as to the care and upkeep of veterans' graves within their communities. Another example, that there are grants available to pay for fixing veterans' graves needing repairs from the state of Connecticut. It made more sense to bring all these existing statutes together under an appropriate community agency, city manager, and a state agency was recommended the Department of Consumer Protection, so that there could be consistent public information and accountability where reporting is required. For years, the example of the annual filing of cemetery financial reports with local probate courts. I can remember 30 years ago doing this after an extensive meeting with the Hartford National Bank that used to care for our cemetery funds. And then we would, again, give those to the probate court. And I did a random check, just called 6 cemeteries in Greater Hartford, and found that in the last years, only 2 had been sending in those required documentation. And the other 4 hadn't done it for years. I'm basically in favor of the bill. I have some concerns about the actual duties that seem to be assigned to these 3 citizens regarding the cemetery reporting, especially when it concerns the annual minutes and the financial information. It also still mentions the probate court. Are they still going to be filed with the court?
Sir, if you don't mind wrapping up shortly.
Certainly. And so many of the cemeteries in the state of Connecticut are small community cemeteries, operating with small group of local citizens who have been volunteering, taking care of selling graves, recording maps, burials, making sure the mowing and trimming is done. Many of these volunteers are the children and grandchildren of some of the original trustees. Someday, some of these cemeteries will be taken over by the towns that they're in. Some are long-established foundations that have been well-funded and have strong investment income that's been wisely managed. Some are owned by religious groups, large ones like the Archdiocese, Catholic Archdiocese, who also provide very good oversight and direction to cemeteries that are owned by individual parishes. Altogether, these represent the jewels of our communities in Connecticut. They carry the history of the residents, their sadnesses and their triumphs, places of rest and reflection, places to celebrate and remember those who gave their lives as first responders, those who served as police and firefighters, and of course, our veterans. Those who served since our country was founded all deserve the dignity and respect of a well-kept final resting place. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any questions from members of the committee? Seeing none in person and none online, thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Right. With that, thank you everyone for coming and participating in our public hearing today. We will adjourn and we will see you all at our next committee meeting. Thank you.